race recap of the Bataan Memorial Death March 2024. Some of you might know I did this last week. In fact, 4 days ago, and still a little sore. This is my first time out running since then, and a lot of lessons learned, some wins, some losses. One of the toughest races I've ever done, and I'd like to share some of my thoughts on that with you guys. Just as a quick recap, the Bataan Memorial March is yearly. It's in New Mexico, White Sands Missile Range on the base. And it is to commemorate and memorialize those lost, specifically during the real Bataan Death March in the Philippines during World War II, but of course to memorialize any fallen service members between then and today. It's a really special event. You get a lot of veterans, you get a lot of civilians, all kinds of people out there, and there are different race divisions to suit your needs. So there's civilian light, that's just running it in normal running shoes, shorts. There's civilian heavy, where you're in, running shoes, shorts like this, but you're carrying a Ruck with 35 pounds. Then there's military light, which means that you're in uniform, and I don't think there's any requirement to carry anything. You see a lot of people with camelbacks. And then there's military heavy, which is where you're in uniform, but then carrying that 35-pound pack. Almost halfway. We're all about 13 miles in. 13 miles to go. We've been going uphill for the past 5 miles and a couple more miles of uphill. Hoping that means nice smooth cruise down for maybe the last 10 miles. We'll see. Never run this course before, but weather's beautiful. Weather's perfect. Weather's perfect, cloudy, not too hot, like 55, no sun. Man, incredible. So a couple months ago, my buddy invited me out, and we decided to do military heavy because we're both reservists, so we're eligible, and we've done hours and hours and miles of rucking. So that was kind of our flavor of choice. Went out there, boots, uniform, and 35-pound Ruck dry. And I gotta say, it was tough. It's the longest Ruck run I've ever done. At one time, 26.2 miles. 35 pounds is not a lot. I've done much heavier, typically 45 pounds and up. And it felt light at the beginning, but about 15 miles in, it starts to feel more like 100 pounds. And that's really fun and painful. So that was obviously an added wrinkle. So although marathon pace, I would say it felt like an ultra because of the added elements of difficulty, right? Boots, pants, uniform, 35-pound Ruck, up and down, a lot of elevation, and in some parts, a lot of soft sand where you're really burning your legs up trying to get traction. So really fun, ultra-ish, a really unique event. Five miles to go. We're in what's called the sand pit. It's just soft sand. Legs are burning, and this is gonna be a fun way to crush the legs a bit more for the end, but it's in sight, 5 miles to go. Whew. So my first lesson was, you know, I've debated between what's more important, the ruck or the shoes, and I still actually can't decide, but I will say I did this one in a new pair of boots. I wanted to try Nike's SFS Carbon mid-cut boots, military style boots with racing shoe technology. And my big mistake was not swapping in my normal foot soles into them. And so one, I did not, and this is on me, but I did not break these boots in enough. And two, there was a suboptimal sole in the boot. And so by mile 8, my feet were really starting to get tired, starting to get numb, and really feel it. And that is an added element of friction that is easily avoidable. And that was mistake number 1. So I ran about 18 miles with extremely tired, numb feet. All right, the second thing that I did not fully appreciate about this particular race is that it is at elevation. You don't think about that when I'm thinking about West Texas or New Mexico, and I know a lot of you will tell me I should be thinking about it, but the race is at about 4,000 feet elevation, and at the peak, at about the halfway point, you're at 5,000 feet elevation, so the same as Denver. And so that is another element of friction that I did not fully appreciate. So layer on the uniform, the ruck, the sand, the steepness, and being at altitude. So that is something to think about when you're training for next year's race, is your ability to replenish your muscles with that oxygen. It's not what I'm used to when I'm training in Chicago at zero feet of elevation. Third observation is that I ran a 50-mile ultra a month prior to this race, and unfortunately I had to treat that as training for this ruck run. I had to just rely on my experience, my muscle memory, and the miles that I put in sneakers to train for this race. And that worked to a certain extent. My legs were up for it, but ultimately building those calluses on my hips, building up that shoulder and back strength, which you don't really train when you're out running or prepping for a 50-miler, that gets painful. So I had to push through that a lot of the time too. So if I were to do this again next year, I would really put a lot of miles in with the ruck, which unfortunately I was not able to do this time.
Honestly, you feel like you can't even stand up.
435?
32 or something?
445? 455, I think, something like that. 450? Overall, I would say it's a tremendous event, extremely well done, well run event. The aid stations were fantastic, so many volunteers. Water and snacks about every 2 miles. The course is brilliant. It's out in the desert, out in the middle of nowhere, but you start in the dark, you get a nice sunrise within the first hour, And then you get to hike some really pristine desert mountain trails up there in New Mexico. Highly recommend. A lot of camaraderie from the thousands of people that are doing this. A lot of sense of pride in being out there and running this for the right reasons, and a great chance to hang out with people from all over the country. So in my opinion, if you're thinking of getting into rucking, or you're just tired of the old routine, you want to switch things up, I think you should really think about adding rucking to your fitness plan. And if you're like me and you like having a race to kind of train for, I don't think you can do much better for rucks than the Bataan Memorial March, which happens every spring in New Mexico. So hopefully this gave you guys a better idea of what the race was like, my experience, some of the goods, some of the bads, but overall an extremely enjoyable experience that I'm sure many of you have experienced before, but I hope many of you will in the future.
Hey, good morning.